Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the relentless geekery.
Hello. Working on mute. There we go. I am unmuted. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good.
You got a nice winter scene going. I got BMW today. I had Fast and the Furious last week. So new exciting backgrounds.
Exactly. I have enough Zoom that I can probably do a year, week by week. I don't know that I'll always remember to change it. I don't know that I'll always remember to change it to something new. And yet, we'll travel the world. We'll display new possessions like beavers and stuff like that. So
it's interesting, like a lot of things in the last year and a half, 2 years, technology has exploded in a lot of ways. And people are doing a lot more Zoom calls for work, for everything, visiting parents and kids and whatever. So the number of companies that went, hey, I can give them a free background, and then everybody that watches that video sees BMW, here, please take it. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've had a thing for years. I don't wear a lot of shirts like this one I'm wearing right now that advertises a company or something. Cause I'm like, they put their name on it. I paid for it to advertise for them. I'm like,
I've always been weird about that too. I really don't like being somebody else's billboard, especially when it even goes the other thing of like the most expensive ones, the polo shirts or whatever like that are like, wow, that, it's not that I'm you're defraying my cost. You're charging me more for being your advertiser. So, but then, I've also seen like there's replies to that where instead of having the polo, they got a little crocodile on them. I think that was from JCPenney or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
It's kind of funny. I really purposefully try to be very brand unaware so that when someone says, oh, that's Le Croc, they're very fancy. It's like, couldn't tell you, found it at the $5 bin because
yeah, that's what I do. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to get some, because admittedly, like this sweatshirt, I have literally had this for 18 years and it still wears well. It's a little worn, but it is a better quality made shirt. They're not all that way, but I go to the thrift store and I'm like, oh, look, this $50 pair of pants is $3.
That's right. Colleen, I have lots of nice clothing because Colleen dresses me better than I dress myself. So I've got a creme bleu. You know what I mean? I got this beautiful maroon with stripes, and it really is. It's nice, but it's also it has worn very well. But even those things that eventually wear out after a while, and so then I'm like, well, this is supposed to be fancy, and now I feel like I'm committing sacrilege by wearing it where it's got like a hole right where this thing joins together or something like that, or I don't know. I don't tend to wear elbows, but I tend to just get it frays on the seams or something like that. Or I'm a big guy with big thighs, and I have any number of like sweatpants that have worn out in the crotchular area. Right. And then it's like, well, how bad am I going to let these get before I think I'm embarrassing myself in public? You get to that stage of, okay, they're green sweats. I better wear the green underwear so that in case it does peek out, it's not like white. And you know what I mean?
Right.
I would rather get more wear out of them than for sure avoid embarrassment. No, and also, what do I really do nowadays? I'm on the computer mostly. I go brief local shopping. I'm not going to work. I would never wear these things in true public, but it is kind of funny where I wear this and I go to Giant Eagle and then I drop something in the aisle and it's like, oh, I got to make sure that I am not facing somebody else because that'll be the reveal of, my God, that guy has just destroyed.
It's the Alan Ball comedy show.
Oh my, and I never let it get to that point where I'm actually like free and easy. You know what I mean? That I'm actually outside my clothing. And yet there must be times where you wear clothing you don't expect to be. I'm going to have to like like I said, bend over, run, something like that, and then you put it in a different position than just walking around. So there really, believe it or not, America, have been some clothes that a guy is willing to retire when they really become just like too dangerous, too much a weird spectacle. And I just don't want them. Like, I have had things where the pocket wears out. And like the first time that I lose a coin or a pen through a pocket hole, I get so pissed that I throw them away. I just can't stand that idea of, this is usually a secure thing and I never have to worry about it. And it wasn't my wallet, thank God. But you know what I mean? The minute you get any kind of thing like that, well, if I put keys in there, those keys are going to continue to wear away at that existing hole until I might lose something important. So there are some things. And having said that, I like lounge pants. You probably have noticed that. You know, I in my various stages of my life, I've been like Mr. Blue Jeans and then Mr. Dockers, and then I just probably, almost 20 years ago now, got a pair of lounge pants. That is, of course, pajamas. I call them lounge pants because what kind of a man would wear pajamas in public? But my younger brother got me one that has like Happy Faces or Dr. Seuss characters or something all over them that really are only for the inside. And I don't think I'm a person that needs attention, but I just decided to wear them one day. And I got like compliments, sometimes maybe snide, but most of the time, like, I really wore lounge pants. I see many, many people wearing them now. And I've never been the fashion forward guy. I've never been the one that was ever going to be a trendsetter. And yet, because I'm kind of unembarrassable and because I like bright colors, or the kinds of things I wanted to wear weren't like Skoal tobacco type things. I don't advertise for those kinds of things. But if it was The Simpsons or Dr. Seuss or Marvel Comics or something like that, it's another fun little signifier of my relentless geekery that I really don't mind letting the world know that I think this is amusing. And now I see people wearing them, and I've gotten also, once you start wearing them, then other people say, well, that's a gift idea right there, ain't it? So my brother-in-law, John, just for this last Christmas, I had given a list full of music, you know, all the albums that I haven't gotten yet or box sets that I like and stuff like that. And he got me some of those, but he also got me 4 pair of lounge pants because he likes them too. And then he's like, well, the way I can get, cover is because Al wears them and then I'm allowed to wear them. Not allowed, he's also old. But you know what I mean? It just was, and he got me good ones. It wasn't like, oh, no, right now I'm wearing John's taste. No, he got me Marvel Comics. He got me cool, like, I like interesting fractal patterns. I like, cool color combinations. And so, hardly ever does a guy think that he might be able to pick another guy's taste unless you just go with like, I got you a t-shirt and I got you some jeans. You know what I mean? That's safe. I wear a tuxedo because every other guy is happy to be penguin number N. But so a whole big screen about that, but it's kind of funny. Once that started to catch on, the way to find those, a lot of what you just talked about, you don't find those at the high price store. You go to Target and Kohl, and where they have them for like $8, $10, $12. And sometimes they wear better than others. So, I've had some that I really did have to get rid of. Some I actually hurt, like where I tore a seam, and then I really didn't want to stop wearing them. One had Christmas trees on them. It's like, well, these are kind of like my December pants. So then, but you go and you try to find like, I don't know how to sew well enough to attempt it. You go to a seamstress and see, well, that'll be $10. But they cost me $10. So you know what I mean?
Right.
I have you 3 pairs of lounge pants that are in the to be fixed pile, but will I ever do it? Because it seems weird to double the price of them because I blew them out. You know what I mean?
That's the same thing I've talked about with the tech. I could upgrade, but where does it cross the line from upgrading to I have a whole new computer now with the same case? Exactly. And for the lounge pants, so we were Christmas shopping and I saw this pair of lounge pants that had ramen noodles, and that is like Jason's go-to. He'll eat ramen noodles 4 or 5 times a day. And I'm like, oh,
if you get something that really suits someone, that's a wonderful find. You know what I mean?
I go carrying them over to Gina. She pulls out the cart. She goes, look what I found for Jason. It was the ramen noodles, but the same
so you
thing.
both had the same psychic.
Okay. Oh, it's even better. She took Adam out, and Adam comes walking up and goes, here, let's get these for Jason. And it was the same. It's like, okay, we know Jason.
I have the laughing pants. They're bright yellow and they have smiley faces all over them. So they attract a lot of attention. You don't expect to see a 300-pound canary walking around. You know what I mean? Well, Colleen and I were in Boston. Like, she had a conference or I had a conference, but we were both out there, and we went to a comedy club one evening, and they liked my pants well enough that they gave us free tickets to come back for another show. And so, we're not really live in Boston, but what a compliment to my pants that they're worth a free show. How cool is that?
Yeah,
so
that's pretty cool. That's memorable.
Exactly.
So, okay, I'm going to bring this up, and we dance around the whole COVID thing a little bit. We've mentioned it and stuff, but I mentioned to you that I was listening to a podcast, an author friend, and she has family in New Zealand, and she went to visit the family in New Zealand, her and her husband, which is one of the great things about, as you know, working for yourself remotely, contract wise, you really can go anywhere if you have the right equipment, and not every job you can do that, but so
for podcasting, sure you can. All you need is your laptop with the camera, you know what I mean?
And writing and a lot of the coding now, you can just get into the servers. So, but anyway, she goes to New Zealand. Now, she was doing her podcast from a hotel room because when they got there, they were told, like, get in this hotel room. You are not allowed to come out for 2 weeks. We'll bring you food, leave it outside the door. You don't leave for 2 weeks. And
I have heard that New Zealand, other places, they're an island. They really can be isolated.
Yes.
And they have done that. The way they kept themselves to 0.05 COVID cases is because they clamped down.
Yes. And that's kind of the point, she was inconvenienced. Yes. They expected it. Yes. But it was more important to visit her family. But then they knew they weren't going to catch anything, and they weren't spreading it day by day, and people are not dying on New Zealand anywhere, because
so
of
once
this.
You're out, it's back to normal because it isn't right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's that what you and I have talked about, that question of, yes, she's inconvenienced, but it's saving lives, it's helping the whole world. And how if you tried to do that to people in America, says, well, now you got to be quarantined. Their idea of quarantine is, well, I just ran down to the gas station real quick for cigarettes.
Exactly. So as you know, Colleen and I got it. You know what I mean? We from the family gathering at Christmas, someone had it, we got it. Luckily, we really seem to have had the Omicron instead of the Delta. So we had mild cases, but we both have tested positive, on either a drive-through sent to a lab test or a home test. In fact, both of us have now done it through a lab. Luckily, for Colleen, it was a persistent cough. For me, it was congestion, that I was snotty and stuff, but it never proceeded into the lungs. It never stole our senses. It didn't make us so headachy and fevery that we were like loopy. So thank God, no brain fog, no lingering effects so far as we can tell. But I have been in contact with my doctor as to, should I come in? Is there anything that I should do besides get rid of it like a flu? There's monoclonal antibodies. There's a new Merck pill, that kind of thing. And she kind of went through, well, the UHHS system, which is where I have my general practitioner, they don't subscribe to the monoclonal antibodies thing yet. There are providers around, but it wouldn't be covered by their referral. They won't give you a referral, and it wouldn't be covered by insurance. The Merck pill, same thing, $700 for the treatment. And like, compared to my life, of course I'm willing to pay $700, but they're not, it's not like, I seem to have defeated it on my own with vitamin C and, over-the-counter cough medication and stuff like that. But she also said, after you've had it, you can be contagious for you can still have it in your system and maybe be contagious up to 10 weeks. And so, well, that takes care of our first quarter. We have had game night with other members of Colleen's family. And now, even if one of them is the one that gave it to me, I don't want to re-give it to them or give it to somebody that hasn't had it yet. So we really are facing a little what you said. Are we really quarantining? Fully masked and careful to touch nothing. I am still going out on provision runs. We're not only getting deliveries, and I'm being very careful, but I am haunted by, I can't stand the thought that I might have been the one that carried it around. So I'm getting less and less. I have not been quarantined. I really have gone out and I've tried to let's make one trip, not 5. Let's go to one place and get everything you need. And yet that the weird mind flip of like, I was totally careful and not wanting to get it. And then I got it. And now I feel bad about myself. I feel filthy. I feel, you know what I mean? There's a psychological studies that say that some people really have a sense of disgust more than others. Like if you put a plate of food on top of a closed trash can, some people can eat it because, hey, it was on top, not in. But other people, the minute it's near the trash can, they're like, oh, you know, their reptile brain overcomes their thinking brain. And I really must have some part of that, because I really don't like to think of myself as an infected guy, someone who might give it to somebody else. And so I'm fighting that. Like I'm not so concerned now about myself. We seem to have gotten through it, but man, I don't want to be typhoid Al. I just can't stand the thought. Oh.
And that's the big thing that it gets so frustrating is, one, the people that say, oh, it's not true. Oh, they're fake. They're fooling us. It's like, okay, that is like the biggest damn conspiracy ever in the world. If every doctor, every politician, every news person that we heard in the world is altogether lying. And for what reason? Is it benefiting every single news anchor to lie? You know, and that's the first thing. So then number two, they tell you things like, well, I'm not going to wear a mask because it's my right. It's like, oh my God. I demand to be in your store because it's no, it's not public. It's privately owned, folks. They can tell you to get the hell out. They can choose not to serve you. And
they have all kinds of things they say that make no sense, but it doesn't stop them from saying and acting on them. You know what I mean?
And it's my choice, my body. And yet they're wearing pro-abortion stickers on their car or something like that. You know,
choice and other things.
Yeah. But I've heard so many stories of these people are like, yeah, you know, we went to a family party. We were having a good time. My wife started feeling sick in a couple of days. She's in ICU and then she died. Folks, get the vaccine. It's like, well, now it's a little late to be saying that because people are dying because of you. That's the frustrating part. And we talked about this. They just don't care. And they're not smart enough to listen to the rationalization and the science behind it. You know, it's frustrating.
Wow. Probably, you know, what are we about 2 years in? Let's say a year and 11 months ago, I kind of coined the term unreachables because it really was like that already. It's not only about this pandemic. It was about vaccination in the first place. It was about global warming. You know, you've seen a similar post where, yeah, this conspiracy theory about global warming apparently includes every single scientist, every single other country than the United, you know what I mean? Like that the amount of data that you have to overcome. If you believe in math, you believe in global warming. There's just no question that it's happening. Here's 1,000 charts in every way. And so about voting rights or about suppression of voting rights. You can name half a dozen issues where you can't present them with enough data, enough facts and reality that they will change their mind. And so then what do? You hope that that segment of the population is the crazy 2%, or it seems that unfortunately the unreachables are, the virulent unreachables are 10%, and the people that want to belong to that tribe of freedom or own the libs or whatever else it might be, that's nowadays at 40%. One of the reasons that there's such a political divide in the country is that it's not slight differences in how we should pursue solving a problem together. It's, is there even a problem? And if there is a problem, I want you to have it. I want these other people to be punished by God, to be punished by being a liberal. It's ridiculous the amount of stuff that has happened to make it so that it's not even worth the discussion in so many ways. And especially as a politician, it's not worth the discussion. It is just a matter of get the votes. We have to get this done. We have to fix our roads and our bridges. We have to put out testing and treatment for the pandemic. You know, the reason that we're here, the reason that I call it COVID-45 instead of COVID-19 is because we had a pandemic response team and they handled, as you know, Ebola and SARS and whatever else was trying to get into our country. We were far more porous than New Zealand, but we had pretty good protocols. And Trump disbanded all of that. So our initial overreaction to what he kept calling the Wuhan virus was because we didn't do any of the checking. We didn't do any of the isolating and quarantine when we found something. It was all disinformation and just kind of shambling from non-solution to non-solution, but never taking on. The way you deal with a pandemic is you quarantine the people that you have it, and you distribute the cure, and you make sure you reach herd immunity as soon as you can. You don't wait for 800,000 people to die. You don't say things that will include the impressionable, the unreachable, to give them the armament to say, I'm just not going to do it, no matter how good the vaccine is, etc. So we're so much in this problem of our own making, and we've said this before too. God, I don't want anybody to die of this. But if someone's going to die, I want it to the people that brought it on themselves.
Darwinism.
I just can't stand the fact that all of us, all the healthcare providers, all the store clerks, all the restaurant workers, you and me, we're all at risk because of this incredible stubbornness and this incredible selfishness. And so it's like, fuck it, die then. Die, get it over with, get out of the way.
Right.
You know, at least this way, you'll be less around to infect me. You'll be less around to vote crazies in that won't do anything about it. You know what I mean? You'll be less on the school boards trying to make our kids not learn how medicine works.
Right.
It's ripple effects throughout society that we really have to kind of get rid of the mad dogs. When the mad dog comes running down the street, you don't try to convince it. You shoot it and keep it from getting to your children.
Right.
And so, good Lord, no, don't go shooting anybody. Please don't go thinking that
it's an analogy.
Shoot the virus, to shoot the comet that's coming at the
Wait,
planet. Don't look up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Don't blow up that asteroid because we could mine it and make trillions of dollars.
As I talk about some of the costs of these things, right now the government is handling this quite well with, yes, there's about to be many, many billions, from what I understand, COVID tests available so that everybody can get home testing and stay safe. And they've already made it so that you can get the vaccine with or without insurance, from what I understand, so we can all get to safety.
Well,
but there's the Shrekellies of the world. Did I say his right name? Shekrelli, I think it is, that did the insulin price increase 50 times as much as it used to be, where there's war profiteers. There really are people that are going to go into that situation, not try to cure it. They're loving having this opportunity in the middle of chaos to fucking pound people for money. And so I don't want to think that the Merck pill is based on how much money can we make. I think it's because it cost a lot to develop it, and that price will come down over the course of time, and that capitalism will kick in, and it won't be just Merck, it'll be Pfizer and Moderna and whoever else has been developing, and we'll see price competition bring it down. But you can learn things from these times as to, was their first response to like give away the polio vaccine to make sure that everybody could get cured? Or was it, well, we're going to stockpile things and release them a little bit at a time because that's the way to make money?
Right.
And I don't know that I have any particular company that I accuse or unaccuse of those kinds of things, but there has to be investigative reporting going on to see who was with us and who was against us.
Right.
You know what I mean? Who's about, you can't talk about how you're a right to life person.
But even that, and it's so jumbled. Who do you believe? Because I know people that say, no, they reported it on Fox News. You go, are you against a news agency?
Yes.
Okay, but
you said Fox, yes.
but that's the thing. You know, we've always told our kids to listen to the authorities and investigate it. The news, well, we've got the news outlets, but they're totally biased now. It's very difficult to know. And my
you know what though? I don't think it's difficult. I think it's just
more
than it has been. There are all kinds of studies, regular immersive things that are continually monitoring the news media. You probably have seen, who is it? Ad Fontes puts out the cool pyramid looking thing that says, on the basis of factualness and on the basis of bias, who should you be listening to?
Right.
And it isn't InfoWars out here. And it is, you know what I mean? There's wackos at the left and right, but in the middle, there really is Reuters, which is pretty much vetted news and unbiased. And
exactly. Yes.
Go to these sources up top.
But that's my point though, is you get the people that will find the one that is reporting what they want to hear and listen. And then they'll say, well, that's more my point. And like, for example, my uncle who did not get the vaccine, does not want the vaccine, even though his neighbor died from COVID. This is the other thing. And you mentioned the home test. His neighbor died from COVID, but they said, no, he had cancer. That's what killed him. And Gina works with people that said they got tested. It's on their record. They had COVID. She said, no, I didn't really have COVID. That's not actually it. And so they why get the home test if you just go, well, it's not true.
I hear you. You know, before I use the term unreachable, I've seen the term fact resistant humans, because it really is that there's all that kind of like how. So we talk about this. I believe in consumer reports. I think that the way to be able to know how good something is to have an unbiased source, test it out, look at all the different factors and say, here's a good car, here's a good washing machine, et cetera, et cetera. That information has been out for 100 years. It's been available to us for 100 years. And yet you still have Suzuki Swifts that flip over in a turn and someone sees it and goes, well, that's a sharp looking automobile. I think I'll buy that one. Make sure it's in black because that's macho. And like, but it's a death trap. It's the Corvair. It's the Pinto that bursts into flames when you ram it. You're like, don't you care about a little bit of like, don't you care about yourself? Don't you care about your family's going to be in that car with you? Don't you care about not buying? Name the product that does have, some things have hazards and some things are safer and some things just more effective. I want a laundry detergent that's going to clean my clothes and not look like candy to my children so they don't pop a Tide Pod in their mouth. And like, there's too many examples of where people really do, as you're saying, talk themselves in or out of something and just won't budge once they get there. Well, Carl Sagan went into it a lot in a number of his books about how getting people scammed is a lot easier than to convince them they've been scammed. They just won't let go. It's ego death. It's I made a mistake, and they can't say that.
Right. Well, I mean, come on, we're talking about some of the same people that are disgruntled because they can't smoke inside a building now. So they stand right outside the door. So you have no choice but to walk through it. And even though there's signs that say, 25 feet away, they're like, yeah, it's my choice. I don't want to smoke elsewhere. Too bad for you, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
This is the same.
You're running down. It's kind of funny. You're running down my list of what I thought were the signs. Think of how bad drivers are. How many bad drivers are that don't check what's going on around them, that are hyper aggressive, that blame others for their mistakes. That's the mindset that's going into what we're having problems with pandemic and global warming and with smoking. Since the 60s, 60 years now, 2 generations of people, we've had absolute proof that it leads to lung cancer. And we still have people that can't stop themselves because they're addicted, will argue about how bad it is for you, because I had an uncle that smoked for 60 years and he died of an auto accident instead of lung cancer. But so you don't get statistics, you don't get numbers. And there's just too many examples of, if I can't convince them with facts and statistics, what's the mimetic game that I have to play so that I can penetrate in there? And there's really good people at messaging, at mimetics, that are like, well, let me tell you a story. I don't need to hit you with the number is 88%. Let me tell you a convincing story that's going to hit you in your emotions, in your reptile brain. If I can't convince you that it's about yourself, then maybe it's about country. It's about God. It's about protecting your family. What are the deep things that might matter to you? And kind of sneak the truth in on you by linking it to that, because they sure are good at linking terrible things to those causes. You know what I mean? When we have, you must have seen them, there's ads going on in Ohio for Bernie somebody that calls himself proudly a Trump Republican. We have to build the wall. He was a legal immigrant, so let's keep all the illegal immigrants out. And just the whole litany of, none of that is true. They don't cost us more in healthcare. They aren't the rapists and criminals. All of what he says is all so fear-based and so ugly about how to hate. And yet those advertisements, somebody's happily paying for them. And if he gets in, we're going to continue that terrible litany of, like, how much of offense does Ohio need? You mean to keep out West Virginia? You mean to keep out, we're not, how is Ohio caring about the fact that he's on now, a year before the election, every time that we watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, our guilty pleasures, why are we getting horrible ads from this guy? Shouldn't they have some standards for, you're a show about facts, Jeopardy, don't let this nut bar on?
Is that the guy that was the Secret Service agent for Trump and he quit? Maybe it's a different guy. He was a Secret Service agent for Trump. He quit and he has a radio show now with like 9 million some viewers. And his whole platform is they're setting things up to get the truth out so that the Republicans are prepared to take things back in 2024. That's his thing.
So I don't know if it's the same guy, but the fact that there's not only one guy that we have to worry about that's saying that kind of stuff, the election was stolen. No, proof after proof after proof that the vote counts were good, that the only people who were committing vote fraud were the bad guys, the Republicans, not the good guys, and that everywhere that there was a fair election, the right thing happened. Biden won, and convincingly. And now what they're trying is what they've always tried, not to have better policies and convince the public of those better policies. It's how do we do voter suppression? How do we make it so there's laws on the books now that say, if the electors don't agree with the result of the popular vote, they can vacate it and vote how they want. And that used to just be called an unfaithful elector. Now they're making it, and I use the term wrongly, it's not the elector, it's like the governor or a panel of people, maybe the Congress for that state, that they can overturn election results. That's not democracy. That's not republicanism. That's not anything but a banana.
It's everything that they're accusing everybody as like a negative turn. Oh, those fascists. Oh, and they have no idea what it really means and what would designate somebody as a fascist. They just throw it out because it's evil and bad. And then they turn around and do exactly what because they don't know what they're really saying, and they don't know what it really means.
Yeah. One of the things I've had to come to grips with, and maybe this is early on, I think I've talked a little bit about, I had some bad things happen in college, but thank God they happened early when the stakes were small, because that's when I first discovered just what liars people could be, how shameless they could be in their lies, and how for a seemingly small reward, they were willing to really fuck somebody over, really, like the 30 pieces of silver that they were willing to accept for a betrayal, it was so small that it was like, wow, this isn't even climax of a book I've read where there's a huge betrayal and it changes the course of the war. No, this is, if I can just get a little more popcorn, I will fuck somebody over. And I didn't want to believe it. But after you've seen a couple examples, and then you get a little bit more attuned to, all right, this new person is sounding a lot like the old person in terms of there's a little snakiness and there's a little too much fervor in ways that it doesn't match the gravity of the thing. It gave me good defense mechanisms, and they didn't always work. You know, when I got screwed over doing my development of trading systems and stuff like that, people had learned to wear the suit. They had learned to talk very, very politely, and yet we're getting a lot of that. You know, what you said about, can we trust media? You can't trust everybody that looks handsome or pretty in a nice suit or a nice dress on the television, because you've got people that are willing to just look you right in the eye and lie to you and read copy that they've got to have a glimmer that this is not true. It doesn't match all the other available facts. It doesn't. It's meant to incite instead of to explain. People get that. People are willing to really do awful things, not because they don't care. There's more sociopaths than I ever expected there to be. You know what I mean? Whatever that thing is about, not quite dark triad, where it's about only narcissism and manipulation, Machiavellianism, you know what I mean? But they really are, it's like the little monkeys that will steal fruit from another monkey. You know what I mean? It's a primate behavior. It isn't about whether they should do it or not. It's, can they get away with it? Are they right. The fact that I have to admit that a lot of humanity, 50% is like the level of decent. And for the 50% above, yay, for the Desmond Tutus and the, you know what I mean? And 50% are not. They're on the make. And sometimes they're on the make all the way to crimes we had to make a crime so that we would stop people from doing it again by putting them in prison.
You know what? It just, it comes back. It almost reminds me a lot. And I wasn't really a part of this. I was too young. I've just seen the stuff. But this kind of reminds me of the whole way of thinking of when the soldiers came back from Vietnam and people were yelling at them and spitting on them and stuff. It wasn't their fault. They were doing their job. They were soldiers protecting their country, protecting the people.
They had to go. That's exactly
and we've
right.
changed our attitude on that, and people have, realized the problem and mistake. But it's kind of that same thing again, is, people are that type of thinking. It just keeps coming back around. And I almost half jokingly the other night told Gina, I says, maybe that's the problem, that we haven't had a good world war in too long. We've had several crises, Afghanistan and after the towers and everything else, but it was not a war. And I don't mean that to help all the warmonger profiteers either, but Everything just keeps dividing us. And when the towers fell, it brought us together. I don't know what's happened since then. What changes?
It brought us together in terms of really hating the fact that it happened. But what were some of the first things that happened? Let's get anybody in a turban. And the most peaceful people on the planet were mistaken for having been the Arabs that did it. And so, oh my God.
And people started going after, like Japanese. What the heck? That was Pearl Harbor 100 and some years ago, whatever. It's just stop.
It's really tough to read current history without realizing how manipulated we have been so many times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We back in the 50s, John Foster Dulles, we don't have just bad guys currently. We've had them all throughout history, and the number of regimes that we overthrew, the number of puppets that we put in place, the amount of money that exchanged hands, or wars that we started CIA wise, it's horrible and startling. And I have not been able to think well of the United States in a while. Recently, just us talking about, hey, we're going to go after the wrong country, not the country that really bombed those towers you just mentioned, but because we just don't like this guy, and we've decided we need to focus for all this hate, all this anger, all this opportunity to make money, and the confluence of all that, you know what I mean, that how much money was spent there, bales of money were lost in the desert.
We can get somebody
going on there.
We can get somebody in there that is more on our side, so we get better deals on the oil, and all of us politicians that are involved with making money will make even more money.
I'll tell you what, do you think that happened? One of the things that I really hate about our current situation is if they had gone in, and this is a terrible thing to say, done what you said, taken over the Middle East to make sure that we could all have less oil prices, OPEC ceased to exist, and that we control it all. That's not what happened at all. They did not guarantee an oil supply to a country. It wasn't a national defense thing. They did enough to make it so that we got to maintain our macho posturing, but all kinds of deals being cut in the background, so that it's still the same sultanates and emirates that own all that oil and therefore all that wealth, and they've turned that into influence. They get to kill, a reporter by beheading him, and nobody got extradited for that. They didn't even capture them while they were in a place we could do that. They let them go back to their country. We didn't do diplomatic relation things that say, hey, we don't really cotton to you killing United States citizens. Like the reek of corruption in so many of those situations, I don't have any solutions or any great explanations.
I agree.
The amount of money that's involved nowadays is so spectacularly large that it explains why we had the Panama Papers and then the Pandora Papers, all the proof of all the despots and rulers. And it's not just third world country people. It's all kinds of people in the first world that are hiding money in the Grand Caymans and the Isle of Man and whatever else it might be. But there's so much money that they can just splash around to pay off everyone, to buy silence, to kill those who won't give in. How many reporters have you read about that got car bombed because they were, you know what I mean? And how many people were poisoned with plutonium, and how many, there's just such incredible influence now that comes from money and fanaticism that all I, as a little tiny citizen, can do is steer clear. My saying this in a recorded podcast is like, what am I doing? You know what I mean?
That's true.
Thank God we don't have 7 million listeners, because
we might now
on the radar then. Oh my God.
Well, see, here's my thinking mostly. I've got a friend who's very politically involved. He tries to keep up. He tries to vote good. He tries to go to whatever to support what he believes in and all that. I think that's great and wonderful. But I also think personally that it's mostly a waste of his time, because anything he does is not really influencing any of those politicians. Nothing he does is going to make them change any of their policies or anything if it's going to benefit them in some other way, because there's other companies, there's other groups that are like, hey, that bill for the space program, well, we want this warplane added on to it so we can get that to go, either get that or stop the space thing. So they add it on. Well, it has nothing to do with it, but it gets added on. So then it gets killed by everybody. Oh, good, we won.
the
or
maneuvering instead of the
or
yeah.
some lobbyist or some group says, hey, we really want this bill. Here's an extra, $500 million. Me going to a lobby in Columbus, a rally in Columbus, doesn't affect anything. I don't care who stops.
$500 million
Yeah.
worth of influence. Exactly.
I don't care who stops and says, yay, good for you guys. We love you. We're voting for the people. We're listening to you. They're not. It just so happens that that rally coincided with this company that gave them $500 million. Yay, look, we did what you wanted.
Yeah, what an amazing coincidence.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and the people around me, there's nothing I'm going to do or say that's going to make them go, oh, man, you're right. I see that. They either already think that or they don't. And that's the end of it. I've got a friend, he's flying, not a friend anymore, really, a friend's father. He is flying the American flag upside down because he doesn't feel he's in America. I'm like, then leave, get on a plane, go somewhere else. And you have that choice, but you seem to be staying here. You seem to be enjoying the house you purchased with the job you have. It's such a contradictory thinking on that.
It's, you know what? So let's geek it up a little bit.
Yeah.
and honestly, because it's a good segue. One of the series that I really have come to enjoy is called Repairman Jack.
Yes.
By F.
You mentioned
Paul
it a bit last week.
Exactly. And they, the reason I first found them was because there was a great pull quote on one of the books that Stephen King says, one of my favorite summer reads or something like that, that they're deeper than just a beach book where it's meant to be fluff, but the premise is that there's a guy that is people's last resort when somebody has really been screwed over by the system, by a criminal, by dark forces, if you will. You can call Repairman Jack and he'll equalize it somehow. He'll steal back what was stolen from you. He'll make them feel pain so that it's either justice or revenge based on what has happened, if you will. He'll find kidnapped people, etc. And there's 15 or 20 books that are a series of those adventures. And it's kind of mystical because it does have influence of the Rakasha, demons out of India are somehow involved. They tie into what he calls the adversary cycle, where it's also, there's been vampires and, if you will, forces of light and darkness that have been on the planet for a long time, and they involve human beings and some eternal beings in this eternal war. So he really has what's called like the secret world books that goes into all of this. The reason it, of course, applies to this is we need a Repairman Jack. Maybe there really are people that are like that. If I got screwed over in my job by a bad boss, you know what I mean? He harassed me, and then because I said something, they didn't listen to the whistleblower, they got rid of me. There's got to be someone you can call and say, well, find out the real information and make sure that the entire public knows about it. And you know what? If the public doesn't do anything about it, then make sure that this guy, you name it, gets hurt somehow to make up for how he wrecked someone's life very willingly, very evilly. And so the books have, while the other big adventures are going on, there's all kinds of those little comeuppances. You know what I mean? And I know I've read in other series, and I'm not sure, it doesn't come to mind, it's kind of a military mindset that that you have to stay within your mission parameters, that you're given a job and you do that job and you really can't fight the entire war. But it's also, there are certain things that not within my sight. You know what I mean? You have principles, you have ways you have to be, and you can't turn away once you see a crime, know your duty, know that something has to be fixed. I've read about that people will put themselves at great risk because instead of putting their head in the sand, they will stand up. And we need a little bit more of that too. You know what I mean? I know that I speak up and put myself at risk more often than I should when something's going wrong in a situation. You know what I mean? Because sometimes I'm not speaking for myself. I'm like, everybody's going to let themselves get cowed into silence by this monster? No freaking way. I not be the guy to fight, but the 10 of us can fight. I'll just be the one to speak up. And sometimes because of my size, I am the guy that steps up because I can't stand it. So I'm hardly that. I'm not Mac Bolan, the executioner, with my war against the mafia. But there's also things about, think globally, act locally. We don't want the world to slide into crime, into corruption, and so forth. And so at least you can do, here in my little patch, I am going to grow flowers, and I am going to stop this guy from running them over with his car. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's got to be things that we can do just to maintain our sense of I'm a good person, I'm a good human being, and don't let those things that you become aware of just kind of say I'm helpless. No, don't learn to be helpless. You have to stand up. You know, if you don't stand up, you don't stand a chance, as Genesis said. So it's got to be true, you know. The Genesis, the band, not the book, by the way, to be clear. You know, I more often quote Genesis, the band.
I mean, it really is. I can't think of it, but there's other characters similar to that I can't let that go. I got, you know, and people like that because it's the fantasy. It's, you know,
It's
I wish I could.
It's the lone wolves.
Yeah.
Often Jack Reacher is one of them. You know what I mean? The Orphan Books by Greg Hurwitz, really love them. A guy that really was like, used to be an assassin and finally got out because he was asked to do one thing too far. And so it's like, wow, how do you get redemption when you've already done 30, 40, 50 of them? But then he's a perfect weapon, right? He knows how to do all this stuff. And now the fact that he's being turned not on people for whom a profit can be made from, but on people that are doing the ordering the killing in the first place.
Yeah.
You start to clear out the corruption using the weapon that might have allowed it to exist in the first place, and that's a good American feeling,
right?
You know, so.
Yeah, and you know, it's actually those are popular for the same reason Harry Potter is, because we can empathize and relate to them, and it gives us that fantasy of, boy, I really need somebody that could, you know, go stop my neighbor from revving their engine at 3 a.m. and take care of it. You know, it's that type of
comic book lines. You know, comic book vigilantes have been around for a long time, and whatever that uneasy detente that they have, you know, Batman wasn't always like cooperated with by the police. He was pursued by, because you know what I mean? He's taken the law into his own hands. You start to see that kind of, why do I agree or disagree with some of the things that we see going on here? I don't want riots. I don't want people breaking stuff up and stuff like that. But you know what I don't want even more is someone putting themselves into the riot situation and acting as if he's then only defending himself when he's the one that put himself at risk. And it wasn't vigilante justice, because justice doesn't enter into it. It sure seems to be nobody has a gun that doesn't want to use it, and he found his turn. So Kyle Rittenhouse fully acquitted, and yet that's not justice. What happened there is a terrible tragedy, and I know I've read legal opinions that say once you put yourself in harm's way, you lose self-defense. You put yourself there. You didn't find yourself in a bad situation. You sought out the situation. Then you can't claim the way to do self-defense would have been stay the hell out. He traveled across state lines with a borrowed gun. I don't see how that fits. Oh, that poor boy being caught in that bad situation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's vigilante revenge. I mean, that's like you said, that's been Batman back and forth. And, you know, and people, I know people would say that, you know, back in the 70s, oh, Dungeons and Dragons is introducing kids to the occult and teaching them magic and all this. And Batman, you know, people go back and forth. He's evil because he's vigilante. He's teaching our people to take what they think is right into their own hands. Oh, well, you let that shopping cart go and it dinged my car. Well, I'm going to bash your brains in. You know, but they're missing really the point. They're just taking what they want out of what Batman was. He always had that honor to stand still in a corrupted society and controlled by the criminals.
And the idea of like proportionate justice, you know what I mean? You don't go to a jaywalker and blow them away. You know, they've actually had characters, one called the Fool Killer, that was like that. For next to nothing little crimes, he went maniac and was shooting people and saying justice is served. And so it's like, wow, that holds that mirror up really well to what are we buying into when we say that lone wolf vigilante justice is okay? No, there has to be a sense of proportion. Like, let the punishment fit the crime. You don't, you know, kill someone because they stole a little bit of money or whatever else it might be. And the real courts have to contend with that, right? Someone, you know, Les Miserables is based on you stole a loaf of bread to feed your family and then you went to prison for how long, a decade or whatever it was. It's like, we are always contending with that. And in fact, boy, this is such a huge topic. Cancel culture often says it's yes or no, it's right or wrong, it's 1 or 0. If you do anything, the only way to do it is the nuclear option or whatever term you want to use for this. But our whole system of justice is based on there are different size crimes. There are different numbers of years you go away or fines you have to pay based on what you did. And it really is that a robbery or a burglary is crime of property, but when you harm a person, it's worse, and or rape a person, or when you do harm from 100 people at once, it's worse. And so you can't take one standard and apply it across everything, because there really has to be proportion and nuance, and there's mitigating factors and stuff. But people rush to judgment, or so much have revenge instead of justice in mind, or whatever the reasons are this is happening. But maybe it's that feeling of helplessness, and when they finally can do something about it, boy, they got a whole bunch of built up anger that they're going to unload on someone.
People forget you're innocent until you're proven guilty. We're going too much to the guilty unless you're proven innocent. And
right. Tried in social media, not tried in the courts.
Right.
Exactly.
And I've brought this up and said it, and we've seen it with Johnny Depp being probably the big prominent example. He was kicked out of jobs. He lost acting jobs. He was just ripped apart online. All these news articles because Amber Heard said how abusive he was. Now I haven't been around him to know. Maybe he is. Maybe he has anger. Maybe he does some of this. But it came out that she basically lied, and everyone condemned him. But he really hadn't done anything to her, at least not to the degree she said. I'll give it that much.
Right.
But everyone, he's guilty. Oh my gosh, I'd never watch a Johnny Depp movie. Okay, but you're wrong. I say this because that's what I lived through. I lived through this. I mean, I could have been completely pariahed from Boy Scouts, from the Girl Scouts, from martial arts, from my friends because of what my ex did. And I don't think people. I think what it was, enough people understood she wasn't quite right in the head, and they believed me and trusted me. So that helped. And I got ahead of it. That helped. But it was the same situation. I was like, at first, what am I going to do? I'm done. My life is over right now.
Right. If this is what stands, it's kind of funny. I don't really talk that much nowadays about She Who Must Not Be Named, because it's 20 years ago.
Your she that must, not mine.
That's right. Exactly. And what am I saying? It's not 20, it's 30 years. We split in 92. But while things were weird, and I was seeing what happened and how she'd talk about it with her mother, and that it wasn't at all the facts, it wasn't the truth. When I saw, let me think how to say this. She did all kinds of terrible stuff. So a little bit to, once again, we find parallels. The things that she accused others of doing was what she was doing. And yet, by being the one to say it first, by being vehement about it, that was her smokescreen for what was going on. Yep. So the accusations of what a bad guy I was, it's like, who do I have to talk to, collect evidence for, make sure that the image I had of my divorce proceeding was going to be, here's sweet little blonde, she who must not be named, in her pinafore dress, and big football player hulking Al, and he's going to be like, why don't we just throw this guy under the jail? I believe everything that she says, and fuck him. And only because I have a pretty good reputation for not being like that did my friends believe me and listen to what I was saying about what's really going on. She's throwing things at me. She's, you know what I mean? I don't want to say anything about it. I'm so happy that chapter of my life is over. Right. But I sure had that taste of what you're talking about. I really don't know that I can get to proving the truth here. I need to get out of this situation, because it's only going to get worse. And I don't want to be the person that, am I trailer trash? Am I really a person that we're going to have our neighbors hearing us yelling at each other? I am not trailer trash. Right. She's assisting me in getting to that. Right. So forever.
In my personal life, I took care of that. There wasn't a problem. But court was completely different, because around here, they totally believed everything she said. And I basically had to prove over and over. And it cost me, we went to court 8 different times. I'd have to refile, go to court several times, go to mediation several times, do this, that, and then, okay, it's final. Add it on. Our divorce paperwork is so thick because of all the adjustments and stuff. And they still don't.
Especially when they lawyer up and get an opportunistic lawyer who's more than happy to grill you, to throw you on the grill.
She totally knew how to work the system. If she didn't follow what was in the divorce decree, but if she yelled and screamed, if I wasn't following what she thought, and she was wrong many times, then I would be in trouble and, basically told you better do it. If she didn't do something, they'd say, well, we're going to have to go back to court and talk about it. And the first thing they'd say is, well, you're not agreeing on this, so go to mediation. I'm like, wait a second. It says right here, she has to do A, B, and C. She has not done A, B, and C. Okay, we'll go back to mediation and talk about it. Wait a minute, she's not doing what we already went to mediate. What am I missing here? And so that's where, like you said, we need somebody that could step in and help the common person. And that's the fantasy book.
Yeah, I'll tell you, all that terrible stuff, luckily, happily in our past. Yeah. I am so happy nowadays. Like I said, funny, I once was at a party where people were talking about, so you're looking for in a man or a woman. And, many things were physical characteristics. One guy said, serenity, stability. And a whole bunch of women bristled about that, because that's a pretty loaded term, stability, if you will. But I came to understand what he was talking about. Colleen and our life is so pleasant. It's so even keeled. We both think and feel the same level of things. There's no hiding anything. There's no getting angry about anything. There's just like, we're really well suited for the temperaments that we have. And I didn't always have that. I've had in the past some people that rushed to judgment or that were vengeful or whatever else it might be. And man, when you can't go home, when your home is not a haven, your life is fucked. And I just didn't have that for a while. And now I have it in spades. Us getting through all this COVID stuff, being around each other all the time, we don't wear on each other. When we go on our road trips and we're like, 1 foot away from each other for 8 hours in the car, hiking, all the things we do, we just don't get tired of each other. We love that. And I think you might have found that with Gina, right? I mean, that I'm hoping that you have that same joy of, you have enough that you both like and enough different, but you just have that even keel and that space for each other and regard, trust, all the things that they talk about in relationship books. You got to respect each other. And she is just she's so brilliant. She's so beautiful. She's so diligent. There's like the top 20 characteristics you want to have in a person. She's got them. And I try to be worthy of that. So I hope that she sees those things in me as well. And it must be terrible to be like, wow, I was 2 years into the marriage and I decided I loved her, but I didn't like her.
Right.
Live like that. You know what I mean? You just,
the consolation, after we were done with everything, she was engaged, not just dating, but engaged to 3 different men in 1 year, got married, and 9 months later was filing for divorce. And when I actually knew the guy because we graduated together. And so after it was all done, I asked him what went on. He's like, she just changed. It was like she was trying to get me mad to argue with her. And she was pushing me, trying to get me to actually get physical against her and stuff. And he said all the same things she used to do to me. And I'm like, okay, so justification.
Because she saw it worked. She got away with next to murder.
Yeah.
And then round 3, round 5. We've known people that are like married and divorced 3 times. And it's like, boy, how did she convince 3 different guys? Because the guys didn't consult beforehand, because the warning flags came out early enough. You know what I mean? It really is. It's amazing the serial marriers that it's like, but then the ending is very similar.
Right. Yes.
And, it's like, wow, they did the same crap. They've learned, well, every time I do this, I get a house. Every time I do this, I don't think it's mercenary. I think it's much more deep-seated than that. There's psychologically
things that we could go on about. So let me ask though, we're so ungeeky today. People are like,
what the hell are these guys? Confessional day instead of geekery. I'm sorry.
You said Repairman Jack, there's like 50 books. How many of
15 to 20. 50. I think there's, and another one of those things that I came in late to the series, there was already like 10 of them out. And then I went back and read, and of course I had to read them in order because he really does great work at including, what has gone before and moving things forward, and things, creatures, incidents, they matter, they reappear, they impact the future. And in fact, I think he would often in the back say, so here's what I kind of have planned for the future. The last 2 or 3 books were what was called a river novel. I don't know that I intend to come to a conclusion in the book so much as just stop. And you know what? The page one of the next book is going to be right after the last thing here. And it was the big rush to Night World, to where the bad guys get the upper hand, and are they really going to be able to come through? So they're really high quality. And he also has a new series out now. Sometimes we talk about this. It isn't only you like that series, you come to trust the author, that they're producing good things. So F. Paul Wilson is now writing the Panacea books, where they're kind of like not a medical mystery, but there's a cure-all that figures into it. And he's using a little bit, much like Michael Crichton, he looks at what are current technological issues that we're going through. Can we cure anything? What species on the planet are intelligent or not, maybe even more so than human beings, and how would we respond to that? And so they're just well written. They're a great combination of big issues and little things that make people people. And so I'm just devouring them. You know what I mean? I was very happy to pick those up, and I love when you find out. And I'm always happy when it's like, okay, a new book out in that series. I might even like stop reading what I'm currently reading when the latest John Sanford book comes out. I really like his Lucas Davenport books, and he's got multiple series. Another one of those that's a great summer read, and another one where it might have been Stephen King that said, if you're not reading John Sanford, you should be. It's like, I trust you, Stephen King. And so I started reading those. So
you don't want to know how many books he receives for people wanting to get little blurbs, that it's very coveted to get that. And he doesn't do it just because they're big and famous, or because they're hot, or because they paid money or anything. He honestly, if it looks interesting, he's read things that he just ran across, literally saw it and said, that looks good, picked it up, read it.
Champions. Exactly.
Yeah. So
he wrote a column for Entertainment Weekly, if I remember correctly, for at least a year, maybe even a little bit more. And it was a great column, because much of what you're talking about, he wasn't doing it because his publicist said, hey, this guy could use a bump. He has wonderful varied tastes, and just talked about, here's movies that I like, and here's books, and et cetera. It was that category that I love, where if I didn't tell you about this, you might not find out about it because it's kind of obscure, but you should seek out Blood Simple, the first Coen Brothers movie, because it's excellent. You know what I mean? And he and out of his 50 columns, 40 of them were, maybe let me make a note. Let me make sure that I listen to Stephen, because
what he also
he's talking about worked out just fine. I like his taste.
And what he doesn't do is say, oh, well, I saw that and it sucked. Oh, I read that and it sucked. He just says, these are the ones I like. He could have read 50 other books before he came across that one. He just doesn't say, this sucked or I didn't like it. This is what I liked. So,
I mean, that's something we've talked about doing this a little bit on the show. We really should have, book of the week, music of the week, whatever else it might be, because I think that we have enough knowledge of the field and reasonable enough taste, good taste, that we really could be. People have talked about how they take notes off of our podcast because we mention things. And I don't know that I want to talk down why something isn't good. The whole world is such an amazing drinking from the fire hose experience nowadays. There's so many things to choose from that it's important to steer people towards the good stuff, maybe a little away from the bad, but much more towards the good, because there's so much stuff that unless you you might not discover it on your own. So if there really are, I'm just finished reading, like Fantastic Four has a new series. They went away for like 10 years in Marvel because it doesn't matter. They finally found the author and the artist that could do the Fantastic Four justice. Don't judge them by the movies. The comic book series was often great. And with Comixology now, I get to read more current stuff than I have for a long time. I had to kind of wait for it to be a graphic novel in the library. You know what I mean? Once I stopped buying regularly, I really kind of fell out of knowing what was going on. And now I get to be more current. And so when we were talking with Colin the other day, it was, well, I really do like Tom King. And certain authors that I really have come to care for. And it's because Comixology lets me read, The Wicked and Profane. I read one graphic novel, but then they didn't have all of them, but now I can get to them all. So all that is in short saying, you and I would be really good sources of, hey folks, don't miss this. You might not have heard of it, but this series on Netflix, really good, this paperback novels, and I tend to be a series reader more than individuals, you know what I mean? But all kinds of, we really could like pepper the world with. Don't miss this. It's really good.
We've been trying
books, the Iron Druid books. Oh my God, they're so great. If you've not read those, the Benedict Jacques Alex Veris books. Oh my God, you should read those.
We've been trying on the show notes. If people are listening and they don't go to the website, they should, because just about every show has links to books, to movies, to music, playlists. We've been putting stuff like that up there. But we should go back. Not all of our episodes have great extensive show notes. Not all of them are transcripted, but we've got programs to do all that. That's what we should do. Compile the great big relentless geekery book of recommendations.
Honestly, Stephen, that's really a good, we're how many are we at? I've lost track. 80 episodes or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 80 something, 84.
So, when we hit 100, that's officially like when a show used to get syndicated and that now it exists forever, so we really could start to put together these kinds of things. A lot of what we talked about has not only been popular and like everybody watches Game of Thrones, but if you don't know that George Martin did an anthology series called Wild Cards before that was actually very good, The Great and Powerful Turtle, it really would be worth turning people on to. Some of our favorites and as I go through the vaults, right now it's been mostly comic books, but I'm gonna just in going through this last year's books to get them off the stairs and box them up and bring them to the vaults because the stacks were getting too tottery. It's wonderful to go back and say, wow, this really was good and I should mention it. So I need to start taking notes for myself, and we could do those little compilations and links and stuff like that. And if we get all those sales through Amazon, I think we'll get like what, $1.50 a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the way to riches right there.
for a comic book recommendation, I haven't read them, but Colin, who's been much more current on comics than we have, he just went through the whole IDW Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stuff. He said it's some of the best reading he's done in a long time of new stuff. And he's just absolutely loved it. He kept running out of his room to tell me about this. And every morning when he'd wake up, it's like, oh, let me tell you what I read last night, So that's his comic recommendation.
I really did always love those, not just the early issues where it was silly and kind of parody. They really have been, they created a whole cool universe that started with aspects of Marvel and grew into its own thing. And that's a good recommendation. Okay.
The newest one by IDW, they've rebooted it several years ago. So you mentioned getting our investing update. You mentioned you got kind of flat. So that's something that we've been hearing. Everything's up, things are up, you're doing good. You started with this much money, now you got this much type thing, but then things kind of went back. So when you say they were kind of flat, what happened? And all that.
That really is pretty much what happened. The first 2 years, I was up 170% after 2 years. Like the market was doing maybe not only 8, which is the usual actuarial number, not 18 or 28 like they'll do if the market's doing well. I was well up on the market because I had invested in lots of tech, lots of med tech, lots of communications, things that were doing very well for a number of years. While the market was doing well, my high volatility growth stocks were doing even better. And then this last year, with the transition from Trump to Biden and all the uncertainty that the craziness of Trump followers are trying to inject into the system so they can retake power. And I don't mean to overly politicize it, but that really is a lot of what's happening is the market likes stability. The market likes thinking, if we just do our job and roads stay open and deliveries happen, supply chains are available, all will be well. But what have we been reading about? Supply chains are disrupted. The pandemic is affecting not just us, but the entire world. The great resignation with people stopping all different kinds of jobs. And it isn't only the minimum wage jobs, it's that there's all kinds of people in tech that the big idea runs on the backs of. They're still getting relatively well rewarded, but not anywhere near what kinds of rewards the investors were getting, which is a terrible thing. But the take that I took when I started this off was think like a rich person. Think like, what insider information do they have? What big bets are they making? Be less only about holding on to your money, but taking on risk to get a reward. And that worked for 2 years. in the face of a lot of this uncertainty, and big caveat, wow, this is just all armchair quarterbacking, isn't it? There are so many levers, so many factors that go into all of this, that what I am mostly is frustrated and determined to hold on to the stuff I have, because I think that every single one of the companies that I have is a good company with good ideas, good management, will do things in the future. But this year was just, I ended up 1% down for this year after having been up 170. So I didn't give it all back. I'm still well up compared to what I started off with. And yet I wasted a year, if you will. You know what I mean? When I'm trying to get to 5X in the course of 5 years, you take a year off. It's like, well, now my things have to explode.
Right.
They have to go like gangbusters to make up for this straight line across instead of this nice steady upward slope. So I bought some new things. I did slight changes to existing things based on my reading a lot about the market and what Motley Fool was telling me about our confidence ratings for various different things. I got entirely out of certain things because, for instance, Zillow, big real estate company, not only were they handling information about things, but they actually started to buy houses. Right. And they thought that their algorithms would be able to say, we can buy these houses, flip them, if you will, and kind of on a national level and in various different markets, because we think that the things are going to go up. Well, you know what? Their algorithms proved not to be true, and they got, or at least not as effective as they thought they were going to be. And so they got back out of that business, but took billions of dollars of loss. Yeah. And that, of course, affects the price. And so I'm into Zillow and Redfin and Open Door because the real estate market is ripe for disruption. It really is. That all the things you know about Remax and Century and all those kind of things, there's so much money that goes into the withholding of information, not pure capitalism, not anywhere near good capitalism. It's much more gilded withholding of information. And the more that these guys get in and say, we're in service to the customer, the home buyer, and to the seller to get you a fair price, but we're going to move all of those points of friction, all those points of contention. We're going to make it as easy as possible. And it shouldn't be that you can just like, hey, I flipped on my phone and bought a house today. But it sure should be that you don't have to spend 10% when you should be able to do it for 0.5%, right, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a number of, and another, let's see, there was an Arabian country that had great prospects, but the more that it became obvious that they couldn't trust the accounting, GAAP, that is generally accepted accounting principles, they're not everywhere. Much of us and Europe and Australia, if you will, the first world, that you really can trust the books, and there's penalties for being fraudulent and so forth. You start to get into China, for instance, and there's so much government intervention and perhaps collusion that it isn't as trustworthy. A lot of people are still pouring money into China because, good Lord, the market is huge and the opportunity is there, but it's not, you can't compare apples to apples in terms of, do I really know what the risk factor is, what the T is, okay? So I got out of at least the one Arabian country that looked to be, there's actually now lawsuits being filed. You know what I mean? That people are saying, maybe you cooked the books on your sales and how much really, and at least one Chinese company, C Limited, where a lot of the expectations for the future, they didn't seem to be in line with what they were really capable of. Other competitors entering the market, the combination of, well, it's kind of Hong Kong based, but still very influenced by China, because China now does own Hong Kong, and as much as they fake as if it's an independent colony, they've also had terrible, like, okay, rioters, we're jailing all 10,000 of you because we're not going to cotton to that, and hopefully nothing happens bad with Taiwan, which they won't even call Taiwan, right? It's the not quite Formosa, but it's the Island Republic of China. I wish I don't want to use whatever term they've come up
with.
So I think I'm out of all the, I have 100 different companies in my portfolio, and I've pulled back from like 6 based on that kind of news. An officer that, a big change in officers, and we don't trust the new management as much. An officers that we found out we really couldn't trust because they did shenanigans. Competitors entering the market, etc. But having said that, I am still in, and for instance, medtech. You know what I mean? I am happily into like who's winning the game. BioNTech, Pfizer, Moderna, certain ones. I don't know that I'm betting on how we're going to solve the coronavirus, but I'm into full genetics, for instance, which does the genetic testing that's going to help us figure out all those different issues. And things about diabetes, things about field treatment for cancer, that at first was like, man, that's mean like wear a magnet to stop yourself from getting seasickness. That's bullshit. Well, no, they're actually proving efficacy for closed systems like brain cancers. The operating on a brain cancer, it isn't the best way to go because it's such a traumatic, horrible infection possible. The person is never the same way to go, if you will.
Right.
But if you can use fields, electric fields, to get the cancer to shrink because you disrupt at the point of mitosis how it can grow more cancer cells. I mean, it's like out of wonderful science fiction, but they're showing it works. Those are some of the bets I've made. Will that happen next year? Might take a while for everybody to adopt the Da Vinci robots that Intuitive Surgical makes use of to do remote operations. And yet that's the way to go. You know, this robot in this hospital gives you access to all different kinds of things that you might not have the staff that is skilled enough, specialized enough to do these various different things. But from remote, you can call in the world's experts and be able to do exactly that pancreatic operation that you couldn't do otherwise.
Right.
So I know I'm dropping a whole bunch of names in here, but like Tesla, you know, I'm into Tesla, and they are a huge success story. I'm like 400% up with them because they're doing everything right. It's not only that they have the car thing going, they have better battery tech. They as they get their cars out into the market, it's not, well, that was all nice stories, but not reality. It's actually that the cars are proving to be amazingly good quality, and that there's still a lot of pushback against automated driving, you know, that is driver not involved driving, and there have been some accidents. But that, well, I guess the whole point is really more accidents than distracted by your phone drivers, drunk drivers, teenagers that take too much risk drivers. And it's kind of funny, please, teenagers, I'm not defaming you, but the statistics support that your brain is not fully formed about how to take risk until you're like 25. And so the reason that your parents' insurance company raised her rates so much is because now you're on the policy and you're a much worse risk than your mom and dad. So having said that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we should do a whole thing on automated driving, because I've read a bit more about that and statistics.
I just that, you know, there's so much tech that goes into, there might be a few mistakes, and we have to figure out how to handle that, the tragedy of it, appropriately and legally and stuff like that. But the cure that it's going to make for all of that, I'm getting too tired, but I won't stop. There are not enough people in horrible, bad traffic situations are paying attention enough. People want perfect, and that's impossibly expensive, but we've already gotten to excellent, and we have to get to where the money and the law and everything else aligns with excellent, because right now we're ready to do all the trucking via, you know, that's if you will, big city driving with all the various different things going on around you is a much different problem than I'm on an interstate and I've got, you know, 2, 3, 4 lanes, and it's even divided from oncoming traffic, and I only have so many things to look for on the sides, rails, white lines, etc. It's we could be automating all kinds of things partially, just like segways didn't make it into the regular population, but in big warehouses like post offices and stuff like that, they're fantastic for letting people be able to move that much farther and safely. And it's, you know what I mean? Like we have to find the right uses for these things.
I love that. So looking ahead to this year, I mean, with things, COVID are once again completely up in the air, it seems. My company's conference that goes on at the end of January, for the second year in a row, it's been postponed. And they just literally canceled it days ago. It was supposed to go on in like 3 weeks. So with all these,
Colleen's in the same boat. They're still talking about doing it, but I don't think it's going to happen because Omicron is here. Anyway.
And with all the supply problems and stuff, I mean, I've got some Kickstarters that were supposed to be delivered a year ago, and I'm just starting to hear that they're coming. So what's the outlook for this year you're investing?
So I'm stubborn in terms of, I think that the fundamentals behind these companies are there. And it might be that instead of my getting my 5X in 5 years, it'll take 7. But there's nothing that I want to bail out of except all the ones where the fundamentals weren't good. Having said that, the Motley Fool just announced its second ETF, an exchange traded fund, where it's the equivalent of a mutual fund, but not in every way. But what it is for the things that I have most concentrated on, small and mid cap stuff that have all the right fundamentals, that have high confidence levels that it is going to. There's more risk involved, but it has a really good chance of paying off. Now they have a fund that covers 150 of those. And so I'm contemplating, why am I paying attention personally to 100 on my own when I could just point at this thing and put all my money into it, or half my money, or whatever else it might be, and let them do all the work of still maintaining what stocks to pick, what confidence levels they have, how much money they're in and out, and my not having to be, that's now a gold instead of a silver or a bronze. I should sell a little bit off of these guys to go more into the gold fund. I would have to prove to myself that my active management of my stocks is going to give me a better return, kind of like a mutual fund of this ETF. I kind of like doing it. I kind of like learning about all these things. It has very much more connected me with current markets, current technology, that kind of stuff. I like being knowledgeable about this, but I am aware that being able to like reclaim that time back to more time at the vaults, more time with Colleen, more time reading, maybe that's an okay way to go too.
It's getting your oil changed at Walmart as opposed to doing it in your driveway again.
That kind of thing, exactly. But the big question, as you said, what's my outlook is, I'm very much holding on to everything and waiting for the market to recover. And I think as we get out of COVID, there's going to be an amazing burst as we get people back to work, back to being able to travel, supply chains ease. All of those are going to benefit my stuff, and more so than, like right now, what we've seen is a pullback to value funds. And it's financial funds, oil, there's like pretty much 17 different market segments, if you will, and they kind of go up and down like a big mixing board based on what the world thinks of the relative risk versus reward. And people retreat to the blue chips, and even if it's a tech company, they're now much more into the Microsoft and the Oracle and the Amazon than they are my more volatile things. But when the market returns, Microsoft will make its nice steady 8 to 20% a year, whereas mine might make 100, and I'm still willing to take that bet because I don't have any losses. I have a downturn, but I don't have any paper losses. It's not that I'm selling it off and kind of tucking my tail between my legs. I'm just impatient to be like, I got plans for that money. When Colleen and I are retired and we want to travel over to Europe, I was going to sell some of that Redfin. You know what I mean? I really have the desire to have this story have a good ending. And right now it's, okay, the heroes are going to have to march across this wasteland to get to the next thing, but they're not going to march. They're going to make it. You know what I mean? Or that is, they're not going to stop marching. They're going to make it. I haven't seen any indications that and wow, there's so much information that's out there that is kind of like the yes, no that we were talking about. Be in the market or get out of the market entirely. The market's going to crash. Get into gold, get into Bitcoin. And I actually have Bitcoin and Ethereum because there's value to those things, having a currency that's not only a fiat currency for various different countries, but there's no way that civilization will let that happen. There's no way that the world is going to so collapse, even with a pandemic, even with crazies in power in certain countries. Like, the world is always moving forward, and it's always going to need better medicine, better technology, better communications, more efficient energy, many of the things that I'm betting on. So a little bit of how we talked about this before, I not only invested in things that I think can make money, I want to create the future. I want to contribute to a better future. And if that's better ways of curing diseases and better ways of being able to secure transactions so that we can skip all the steps in Africa, South America, Asia that we had to go through as first world countries to create a currency, establish banking, then checking, then credit cards, then phone apps. If we can jump past all that with Mercado Libre, I really believe in giving everybody the ability to have, if you have a phone, you have a bank. You have the ability to transact in the world instead of it being, I got to go to a currency exchange and give them 20% of my check to get it cashed, or whatever the current rates are. I know they're not good. I know that they shouldn't even be there.
Right.
Why is somebody making money off the fact that they provide this service in a usurious way?
Right.
So I want to create that better future. I'm not giving up on, hey, it's the pandemic. Back in your caves, everyone. Back into being scared, everyone. No, I think this is a better future, and I want to be part of it.
It's the Roddenberry dream.
Yeah.
It's a world. Again, we've said this, and I truly believe this, that once we find a planet, once we can get to another planet, once we find a planet that has other people, no longer is it American or Israeli or South American, Brazil. You're from Earth. Plain and simple. That's it. And
There's so much we have to get there, don't we?
Yeah.
We have to. You know what I mean? The fact that so much of this increased tribalism and hatred and prejudice is not that the world is shifting back to that. It's the dying gasp of the people that don't want that better world. They want this terrible world, in those terrible ways at least, to stay just where it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it'll be generational change, but there's already all kinds of, younger than me, that are saying, wow, I just can't believe that that's how you once did it. That's so inefficient. That's so, like, it gives so much power to people that don't deserve that power.
Right.
Get all the rent takers out of the way and have there be more real capitalism. And so, you know what I mean? The Roddenberry future, the Carl Sagan future, all the science fiction and science fact that we've read, I want it to be that it really is, mRNA technology is going to enable us to cure a whole host of different diseases. And I want those people to be given the funding and the government assistance mandate, at least acceptance. I want the FDA to still be very careful in what they approve, but not to have the approval be based on, keep that back, because we got to get the lifestyle, the lifespan of this drug from this much lobbying interest. They're trying to make it so you can't do a generic version of that yet. You know what I mean? There's just so much. The corruption premium is high currently, and these forces are one of those things that's leveling that field.
Yeah.
And I really believe in a lot of it until they get bought out and become corrupt. And who knows, then we'll start the cycle over again. You know what I mean? In
some different new way. It's just a different level.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Can I get one final thing?
Please.
So Zynga, they make games. And during the pandemic, lots of games did very, very well because people had time on their hands. As the pandemic started to ease, they went down a little bit, but they still had established really good brands and so forth. Well, Zynga just was announced that it's going to be acquired by Take-Two, and my Zynga stock went up 40% in a day.
Wow.
Because they really like that Take-Two gives them new markets, new funding, new et cetera, et cetera. They might not like Take-Two went down 14%, if I remember correctly, because often the acquirer takes on also all the debt, the hassle, the whatever. But my Zynga was always a very inexpensively priced stock, like $6. So whenever I do a whole bunch of stock things, often I'd have $20 left. Well, I don't want to have just $20 sitting there. Buy 3 shares of Zynga. So I had accumulated quite a nice set of Zynga, and now I just got this wonderful premium for them. So by no at all special intelligence on my part, but a very nice, I believed in them, they were a good company, and now somebody else believes in them enough to pay me extra money, a premium on the stock price.
I'm going to add that to our list to talk about the changing world of the video games and how things are looking for the future, because I've been getting involved with that a lot more again.
Exactly.
And I've been studying
the development center, the ability to do that, and how I just read about Flutter, if I remember correctly, that it's now one of those places where it used to be if you could develop for both Mac and Windows, you were golden. Well, now, of course, it's Android and iOS, and you know what I mean? And for Xbox and stuff like that. And Flutter seems to be the latest entry that says you can develop one place and then kind of just with small tweaks compile for every single major platform. And that's a very, very powerful place to be in if you're trying to put together the next Angry Birds, and it's available on everywhere.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because that was going to be my update for the programming and Raspberry Pi and all that. So
all right,
one of the things I've been working on, I've got a couple things with wanting to create hybrid cross-platform mobile apps. And I say hybrid because I was using Cordova, or wanting to use Cordova, because it fit with the Twine program, which exports everything into HTML, CSS, which I can import into Cordova. But I also have this idea for a story, a GPS triggered story-based app. It's not new and original. It's, we talked about the tours, other companies do it, but I wanted to write and build my own. So I've been working with Cordova, which is the open source of what used to be PhoneGap, but I think it's starting to get to be abandoned. I have tried it on several different systems, and I cannot get everything set up to just work right. It's been way too much time, effort, hassle, struggle, trying to figure out the problem. And
you want that set of foundation classes to just like work with current stuff and be fixed when it stops working, but not by you. Okay. And
it's always this little problems, like the latest thing. If you have the latest Google APIs for Droid and you do Cordova, well, you have to manually go in and change several file extensions, or the thing's not going to work. And it's like, well, why do I have to do that? Why it detects everything else, detect it and fix it.
Exactly. There should be a pre-compiler. There should be an installer. There should be something that does preparation for a new platform. Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So it's fallen behind, but I hear a lot that the progressive web apps, PWA apps, are taking over. So I think that might be why it's starting to fall. So I'm not abandoning Cordova, but I'm like, I have wasted way too much time. I'm going to look elsewhere for some of the things I
want to spend your time on your ideas and your novel things, not like it's, correcting typos or making sure it's in the right column like you used to have to do in Fortran. I date myself, but like, man, every time that one of those things stopped, that there was you didn't have to have a strong typing of every variable to stop the character in a numeric field type stuff. It's like, the computer should fix this for me.
Right.
This should not be a problem.
Right.
I shouldn't have to do garbage collection routines. It should manage memory for me.
Thank God we don't have to do Ghost Sub anymore.
Exactly.
So that's the update for the programming. I'm still playing around, and that's why I want to talk games. Well, maybe next week or two we'll do games, because I've been looking at a lot of things. But I did get the 3D printer. Creality Ender 3 version 2. It's definitely the home market. It's a kit. I looked at the presses. You're right. Those are very nice machines. Big. They're a lot bigger than this for the most
part. Like a dedicated desktop for it instead. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. Do those come pre-assembled? Do you buy it, or do you put it together?
You can do both. And I think you save like $500 or something by having you build it yourself instead of they building it, Right.
So the Ender, it's a kit you put together. And I mean, we know this is not a top of the line machine. I paid $150 for it. So I'm not getting a Cadillac. I get that.
That's worth something to try it out and to see.
Exactly. I will say, if you get a Creality Ender, don't even bother looking at the manual. Do not go to their website and use their video to put it together. They all suck horribly. It's terrible.
So there's another resource out there that you
God, there's 3 million. The community has so much. I just went and looked at a couple, and I'm like, this looks good. I like that, the way this guy's explaining it. And I followed, and I got it put together without lots of problems. I mean, how many times have you put tech together? Back in the day, building a computer, you flip it on, there's no power, nothing.
Exactly that. Yeah. You got to go back and reread. It's like, but first.
Here you go, Al. Or you get the post beeps, and you have to look up too short and long. What's that post? Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah.
Memory error. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So I finally got it together. It took a couple hours. I was taking my time watching the video. And it's mostly working, except I ran into a little issue with feeding the filament. Just where they have the motor and the gears to feed the filament, it has a spring release, and when you grab that, it turns the filament just so slightly so it doesn't line up with the hole.
Oh,
And then when you let go, you can't keep pushing it. It's not lined up right. And
how interesting is that? Because it's precise. It has to be precise.
yeah. But
Okay.
well, it's just getting it into the tube to go to the nozzle. Once you get it through that next little bit,
then it pulls it with the little tractor or whatever.
yeah,
like
it takes
that.
care of all of it. So
yeah.
the problem is I've said this around here, and like Gina said, well, just put it on the dining room table and set it up. I'm like, we can't leave it there. She's like, well, why not? And I think that's the problem a lot of people don't get is these 3D printers are not like dot matrix or inkjets where you just set it up. Yeah, you don't just plug it in and it works. Because my cousin's grandson, the great grandma got him a 3D printer for Christmas, and he's 7. And I'm like, Gary, this isn't a 7-year-old thing. It's going to take you hours to put together and then tweak and futzing with it. And then when it doesn't print right after 8.5, because I told Gina, I said, Gina, we can't put it on the table because it will take 8.5 hours to print. You jiggle it with somebody walking by and it's ruined.
Right.
Oh, right. I had said that, but I don't think people understand unless they're really thinking and seeing it. So I still have a little work to do to get the final bit. But other than that, I'm loving the printer. It feels very solid.
Very envious. That's really cool. You'll have to do regular reports because I just first time you hold up, your first little player, your little piece, your little troll or whatever. It's going to be very
well. Cool. That's the other thing I don't think people realize is, again, it's not like opening a Word document, hitting print and getting your papers. That every printer is a little different. So you might get a file, but you might have to adjust it for your printer and your profile. And that I'm learning all these terms. But for example, the one this guy said, like Darth Vader, you have Darth Vader holding his arm with the lightsaber out. Okay. Well, the printer cannot print without the support. So you have to sometimes go into the CAD program essentially and add a support, mark it as a support. So when it comes just to hold it up while it's printing, and then you just break it off.
You're going to set, you're going to trim it off. Okay.
And there's lots of, and the other thing you got to worry about is if their like head is sticking over underneath here, this is all open. Well, you can't just leave it open or it just falls off. So you have to maybe slice it and do it in more than one print, or you have to put the support there, and there's structures internally, things hang when it's printing, it's just all these little things.
How much do you have to either make it solid or honeycomb it, or what different kinds of honeycombing you use to give you the right amount of structural strength per filament? Yes. So I've read a lot about this without having gotten one because I really wanted to have a better way of what am I going to buy based on what I want to do, and which ones handle the things that I care about the most. If I was just going to create square pieces for Soma, there's a different printer than if you're creating a realistically good Darth Vader.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And the results I saw when things are adjusted, and it looked really good and good filament. The other thing is the slicing is how it goes through and does each layer.
Right.
And each printer is different there too. Different nozzle sizes, different size of what you're printing, different thickness of each layer. So you could have your Prusa and have totally different number of layers than I have with my Ender. So I have to compile the image to work with my printer. So, people don't realize all of these types of things. It's a little futzing. Again, it feels more like I'm back in the early 90s. I'm buying parts to build a computer, and then I'm installing Linux and typing install make for everything.
Exactly.
Compile, build,
all the drivers that you need based on your drive, your bus, your you know what I mean. You had to make sure the drivers matched and that they were current, and that very interesting.
Yeah,
so I kind of love doing that, but it really is. I always thought about it. It's like, man, 1,001 things that could go wrong, and I conquered them all and got it to work.
Yes,
but it wasn't just okay, machine, turn on. You really had to take care. You had to take your time.
Yeah,
and learn a lot about how to troubleshoot it. You know what I mean? If this doesn't work, I can't just like take it apart and try again. There's got to be a minor thing I can do. What's the you know what I mean?
It's the same thing when we were talking. Computers are great, and I love it because you got your Mac, we got Windows. You buy a system all done with the OS installed, you turn it on and you use it. That's great. But you and I both grew up in the days when that wasn't the thing. You know,
That's right.
That's why I love my Raspberry Pi. That's why I love this 3D printer, because it's that whole DIY maker mindset that people are
Really
into.
is.
And I
Yeah.
get that, really.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
so
kind of funny. I think I got away from that a lot because I really wanted to be about what was I writing, what was I working on. But then after a while, I realized I was missing it. It's
Yeah.
its own cool activity to figure it all out, to make
Right.
something like it really could have gone wrong, and I didn't let it. I made this work. There's pride in that. There's
Yeah.
understanding of what's going on in it that helps me in every other aspect of my using it. And the more that I've become, you know, like cars nowadays, right? You don't like listen to it and then go tweak something. You
Right.
plug in the diagnostic thing and it'll tell you. And so all those good old mechanics, they're like bereft because they don't have a car to tinker with anymore. It's all computered. So
Yep.
okay. All
So
right.
I'll keep you updated. Hopefully I'll get something printed by next week. I'm going to mess with the filament. The thing is, I got to move it just to mess with it and then put it back, because I don't
Okay.
want to leave it in the dining room.
And re-level it, right? It's very important that it all be
Yeah.
leveled perfectly. I knew that when I committed to getting one, I was going to have to see that's the dedicated, heavy, stable table
Right.
that I'm going to put it on. And indeed, it isn't where I could bump it with my hip. Oh, there goes 3 hours of printing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And that's what we'll come across. But again, it was $150. It's fun to play with. And so if I get a couple cool little prints, and then I get the bug and want to upgrade, but well, you know, I need to get a desktop. I need to get a new laptop. And we really are talking about getting a Oculus 3D because my cousin's got one. And
right. You got to join in. I hear you.
well, because we could play Star Trek Bridge Crew.
Okay.
So if there's no other reason to get an Oculus, it's to play Star Trek Bridge Crew. I mean,
there we go.
you know, everybody gets their own assigned part
Right.
on the bridge. That's
exactly
awesome. So,
all right.
oh wait, before we go, one last thing. I got trivia for you.
Trivia,
and then
you
we'll go.
mentioned yes.
Okay, you ready?
Okay.
What was, since the new Boba Fett show's on, which you haven't watched,
Right.
what was Boba Fett's first appearance?
So it wasn't like, you know, second movie, number 5?
Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah.
No.
Huh. In a comic book instead of a movie?
Oh,
Was he-
no. No, actually, I thought you'd know this one. That's
No.
interesting.
I don't. Okay.
So
Was he in the bar scene but not speaking? Was he like
No,
visible
no.
because of the distinctive helmet? Okay.
So I'm going to say this because the answer has actually recently changed. And that's why I was saying the trivia. So his first appearance has been the holiday special. There was a little cartoon in it that introduced Boba Fett in the holiday special.
Okay.
But there's a new documentary on Disney about when they came out with the show that actually before the holiday special came out during the summer, Marin County was doing a parade. And since Lucas is there, they said, hey, could we get some Star Wars people? So they actually used costumes from the movie. There were actors walking in the parade in the actual costumes, and they sent the Boba Fett costume. So
anybody who knew Star Wars was going like, who is this guy?
That was it. They talk about that nobody knew who this character was walking with Darth Vader.
What a great teaser on Lucas's part. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. Oh,
So-
what a great piece of trivia too. I have never read that reference that he actually was first in live action in a parade, if you will.
Yeah,
Not
that's
even
the first time I heard it.
TV show, a cartoon, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
the cartoon is on Disney Plus. It's in the Legends stripe. If you see that. So
in fact, I have looked into there, and I've not watched all the Legends because I don't know, I just haven't. You know, there's too many things to watch. You know.
yeah. Well, there's not a lot.
Discovering Wipeout is like, oh my god, I'm not watching all these important things
There's
because
not
I
a lot.
like
That's
the
super
Wipeout.
great. I mean, they got the old Ewoks and Droids cartoons, which are for kids. They've got that one from the holiday special. They do have the original Gendy Tartakovsky Star Wars when they did it on Cartoon Network for 3-minute episodes. They have that on there.
That
So-
it's cool. None of that goes away. It's all digitized.
Now,
It's
yeah.
all out there forever. And I love when they do that. That kind of repackaging, reintroduction. That I think I mentioned, I get all kinds of CD box sets that are like the first 5 albums from a band. And if I like them, I really do. So I just got the Stray Cats one. And it's one of the things I made an allusion to. Man, when you're in the mood for rockabilly, it's just the right thing. It's just, I know that they're simple songs. I know that's a particular genre of music, but getting a whole bunch of Stray Cat strut-ish songs in a row is just like, I'm just ready to go outside and shovel the snow now because I'm energized.
I added that to the list, so we'll talk more about Stray Cats in the future.
There we go.
And,
Okay.
Brian Setzer. So,
Exactly.
All right, man,
right.
we got to go.
Exactly. Long session. Thanks very much, Stephen.
Later.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Okay.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.